Hey guys, how we doing out there? 2021 Bassmaster Classic. On my way to Fort Worth right now, so I'm pretty excited. I hope everybody's doing good out there. And you know what? We're gonna get this thing kicked off, so you stay tuned. It should be entertaining. So you guys may be wondering what it's like to be a marshal in a Bassmaster Classic. Well, I learned from my first experience on the Sabine River, it's really, really neat. But it may not be what you think. So I'm on my way down there right now, and I'll go ahead and turn the camera around and we'll give you a look at the Texas Panhandle. 2021 Bassmaster Classic. It was a good one. As you guys probably already know, our reigning champion Hank Cherry went back-to-back wins and won this event on Lake Ray Roberts. And really proud of him, proud of all the anglers. They did great. Had some really good weather. Of course, we had it in June. It's normally in February. So the event was just spectacular. It really was. Special shout out to Trip Weldon. He was able to come back. He's been battling cancer, and he was our honorary weighmaster throughout the entire event. To give you an idea how it went, my day started at 2 o'clock in the morning when I woke up. And because we were in Fort Worth, and the lake was about an hour and a half away, we marshals got on a bus and they bussed us up there. So we left Fort Worth at 3 o'clock in the morning, went up to Lake Ray Roberts. They had breakfast for us, lunch, and we met up with our anglers, I guess around 5:30, got all the boats launched, and we were meeting over at a beach. And at the beach, our MC, Dave Mercer, he would call out the boat numbers and the anglers and a little background, and we'd take off from there. And that was normally around 6:30, 6:45, right in there. We'd go out and fish for 8 hours. We'd be back in at between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, depending on when your departure time was. Load the boats back up. So on day one and day two, what they would do is they were weighing all the fish at the lake and releasing all but a couple of them. And then the anglers would throw those fish, their biggest fish, back in their live well, drive back to Fort Worth, and just about as soon as they got there, they would start the weigh-in ceremonies. So it went pretty good. And you could tell when they would pull those fish out of the live well, they were good, they were lively. And then they would, not the anglers, but they had a truck, they would put the fish in a tank, and they'd travel back to the lake and drop them off that night. So the Texas Parks and Wildlife, shout out to you guys. The fish were really taken care of well, and the event really ran better than I thought it would. On Sunday, the final day, they did bring all the fish in and weigh them on stage. So nobody knew until, they announced they weighed it right there on stage. So nobody really knew until the end of the event who had actually won. And unfortunately, I wasn't at the final weigh-in, but I did listen to it on the radio on the way home. So it was pretty exciting. One of the highlights of day one was the invocation was given by Senator Ted Cruz. And I'll tell you what, Fort Worth, Texas, you guys showed up. There were tons of people there for the launch at 6:30 in the morning. Tons of people on the beach, to give us a big send-off. And it was pretty exciting. But from there on the water, it was exciting, don't get me wrong, on the water, but it was a grinder. Guys, it was better than the Sabine River if you watched my previous video, but you know, a lot bigger fish caught, but there were not a lot of 5-bag limits, you know, for a big Texas lake like Ray Roberts. So what had happened, the lake got blew out, had tons of rain, and you know, for June, they don't want to give any of that water up downstream. So the lake was 4.5 feet high, and they just really were scattered out. None of the 3 anglers I was with could really latch in on a pattern. You know, there were just a handful over the 3 days of 20-pound bags, and realizing that there were 6 and 8 pound fish caught every day. But, you know, they may be caught, you know, they may be caught by an angler who only caught 3 fish that day. So it really was. It was kind of a grinder. It was a good event. It still took over 50 pounds to win it. You know, so again, hats off to Hank Cherry, all the anglers in the event. Well, this whole thing started on Wednesday. We got to go out and practice with a pro. I mean, guys, this was my bucket list day. It really was. Because there's no pressure on the pro. As a matter of fact, Scott Canterbury, the 2019 Angler of the Year, was the guy I was matched up with. And, you know, he was just out looking at new water and fishing. He was just fishing. No pressure. Great guy to be with for the day. Had an absolute blast. We started out by fishing topwater. He threw a frog. He threw a whopper plopper, and we went all over the lake. And he runs a Skeeter. And that Skeeter was really nice to ride in. He's a great driver. The water was calm. Just an enjoyable day. Ran a Lowrance trolling motor, the Ghost. All Lowrance, fish finders and everything. We didn't use the fish finders a lot. He used the forward-facing sonar a little bit. We did go offshore, found some tree piles. When they built the lake, they piled up a bunch of trees for structure in different places, and he used it there. We dropped a big spoon on him, you know, deep diving crankbait. Never did get bit doing that. But what was really cool about it is when we went into the bushes and he's just flipping, and he's throwing a 3/4 ounce jig is what he really wanted to catch him on, you know, to get that bigger bite. So he's flipping, and we've been talking, and he goes, "Hey, you mind if we listen to the MLF event?" He said they got the championship round of the Chickamauga event on. "Oh, sure." So he gets his phone out and sets it on the side of the boat. And so he's sitting there fishing, we're talking and listening to Kevin Van Dam win an event. I mean, you know, it just doesn't get any better than that. It was just the funnest day I've had on the water ever. So anyway, we caught quite a few fish. Well, we didn't catch a lot. We didn't even hook a lot, because a lot of the time he was fishing without a hook. Most of the time he was fishing without a hook. As a matter of fact, the only reason I think he put a few in the boat was because he saw me back there with my GoPro shooting, and he wanted to give me something on camera. Now, he wasn't fishing areas that he planned on fishing during the tournament, so he didn't mind sticking a couple of fish, you know, that you can see back there behind me. So, but we just really had a great day. Had a lot of fun with Scott. So at a regular Elite Series event, they don't have a practice day. So you're only guaranteed 2 days in a regular event and a third day if you're one of the super marshals. Of course, now the Classic costs you $500 to be a marshal, where a regular Elite event is only $100. So anyway, Thursday we had the day off of the water. Thursday was media day, and they gave us credentials to get in and everything. So it was pretty neat. Had a good time doing that. First thing they do, they give you your swag, the hat. They did give us 3 of these shirts. So that was nice. We had a clean shirt to wear every day, to represent bass, because there were a lot of cameras on the water. And so then after that, they fed us lunch, had a little bag lunch, nice sandwich in it. And then we got to just walk around and talk to the pros. And that was a lot of fun. So what I noticed walking around, I did the first lap around, just kind of looking at all the different fish finder equipment that they had on their boats. What you'll notice with the elite pros, or what I noticed, and these are speculative, I didn't count, but it looked like about 60% of them were using Lowrance, about 20% were using Humminbird, and about 20% using Garmin. So it was pretty much, there were a lot of Lowrance there. Now what I did notice was a lot of the guys would have a couple of Lowrance units, and they'd have the Garmin for the forward-facing sonar. So as you can see in some of the pictures, there was some people who were just mixed. They weren't, strictly Lowrance or strictly Garmin. They had sonar units specific for what they wanted to use them for. So I did get to talk to a bunch of the anglers when the media wasn't around them, because the media was just swarming around some people. You can imagine Hank Cherry. I stood there for a while trying to get to talk to him, Seth Fighter, John Cox, Chris Zaldane. Didn't get to talk to any of those guys, but I did have some decent conversations. One in particular with Matt Herron. We talked about fish finders for sonar units for probably about 20-30 minutes, I guess. Brock Mosley, talked to him for a while. Brian New, who he hurt his wrist. He broke a bone in his wrist on one of the practice days, and he wasn't in a cast, but he was in a kind of a splint, and he had to get all left-handed reels shipped in from Abu Garcia just so he could fish the event, because it was a flipping event, and he couldn't use the right-handed reels with the broken hand. So anyway, Brian toughed it out, did a good job actually. Talked to both the Johnston brothers, Chris and Corey. Of course, I've fished with Corey before. Clark Winlet, Micah Frazier, the brother of Mark Frazier, who I fished with before. And it was a lot of fun, but it was a short day, gave us a chance to get to bed early and get ready for day one. So also during media day, shout out to Mercury, Yamaha, Huck, Minn Kota. They set up tables outside the Marshalls where we gathered and gave us a bunch more free swag. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Classic Expo and you don't walk out of there with a lifetime supply of gators or something like that, you haven't been there. Because I'll bet I picked up 20 different gators. I like those net gators. So anyway, the media day was a lot of fun, and I hope to get back there again.
Get loud for the C-O-double-B, Brandon Cobb.
Well, my goodness gracious, let me tell you the news.
3 fish here today, 7 pounds, 5 ounces, was in 42nd place.
So on day one, I draw Brandon Cobb. Brandon is in his 3rd year on the Elite Series. He's a 2-time champion already. He won on Lake Hartwell and he won on Lake Fork, and he's fishing in his 2nd Classic. So Brandon, he's like 31 years old, very accomplished already, had a great FLW career, and got invited into Bass, and is just doing a great job. So anyway, on day one, from the Sabine River, my Sabine River experience, I'm ready to go into invisible man mode again, right? This is a classic. The last thing I want to do is impede this angler. Well, we launched the boat and we get out there and his wife wades out in the water off the beach and they're talking and Brandon and I are talking and they have me taking photos of them and everything. And he was really talkative. I mean, this was just so opposite of what I expected. You know, when he'd put on a new bait, he'd get into the locker and he'd grab a bait and he'd put it on his hook and he'd just slam it back down. He wasn't worried, talking the whole time. And, you know, a lot of good conversations because he was asking me about some of the Marshal rules and what they tell us to do, what we can't do. Like he is actually going to talk to him. As a Marshal, you cannot leave the boat. If it gets stuck on a sandbar or on a log or something, you can reposition yourself in the boat, but you cannot get out of the boat. The angler can. He can get out and push. But, you know, Brandon said, you know, that's one rule I really want to change. I got a feeling he got stuck once and probably had his Marshal jumping up and down trying to get the weight off because the Marshal, you know, wouldn't and couldn't leave the boat. So anyway, had a great time with Brandon. He runs a Falcon boat, which really rides really nice. It looked a lot like a Phoenix hull design and rode a lot like the Phoenix as well. Now this was by far the roughest day. We had 25, 30 mile an hour winds and everything was a flipping bite. So, you know, it cut the lake in half basically, made it fish real small. We were fishing around a lot of other anglers. And come to find out too, the anglers talk a lot on the water. You'd be surprised because you'll be coming around the corner, around the point. There'll be another Elite Series coming around the point the other way, and they'll talk about it. Hey, you know, you want to fish on around here, or do you want to come around here? And a lot of times, because both of them have fished that point, they'll just both take off and go to a different area. But because it was so small, you had 2-3 foot waves breaking in on the brush, which was 2 to 3 foot deep. So, you know, we could only fish certain areas. But all in all, it was good. There was only a couple times in that Falcon when he hit a bump, because we ran all over the lake. When he hit a bump that, you know, my teeth kind of jarred. So I give the Falcon an A. It was a good riding boat. He runs all Lowrance, Ghost trolling motor, all Lowrance sonar units. He flipped a craw 99% of the time, threw a buzzbait a little bit. But it was pretty much, he had that flipping stick in his hand all day long. We ended up catching 3 keepers for 7 pounds, 5 ounces. And I believe he finished day 1 in 42nd place. And both days, day 1 and day 2, the guys were losing some fish because they're throwing right in that bush. And a couple of them, I think, were pretty big, and so did Brandon.
Get him out. That was a big one.
Oh.
Did you see him pulling down the
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Dang it. That was a big one.
Because he was kind of sad. He lost a couple of them, and you can tell when they set the hook and they're trying to move that fish, and that fish don't move much, they kind of know it's a big one. So, you know, we definitely had enough bites to get a five fish limit, but didn't quite get there. Anyway, had a great time with Brandon on day 1. So after day 1, because not all the Marshals, but a lot of us rode on the bus, we had to wait for the last guys to get in, which I think I was one of the last ones actually. So we were late for weigh-in, but I did get to see most of it. And if you've never been to a Bassmaster weigh-in, it's pretty exciting. And you know, I enjoyed that. So wake up at 2 o'clock the next morning, get out there, and I drew Clent Davis. Clint's been on, this is his second time on the Elite Series, and he's a Forest Wood Cup champion on the FLW Tour. So good experienced angler. I think he said he'd been fishing professionally for 12 years. Pretty talkative guy, but he was real fast. When he would hook a fish, it was in the boat and in the live well pretty much by the time I could turn the camera on. So we only caught 3 fish, but I didn't get a lot of footage of it. But real good angler. And another thing I noticed, and I noticed it at the Sabine River too, I think these guys probably talk a lot more than what we would think.
2 or 3. I got a little spot, about 3 pounder I just caught.
That's what I got, a 3 pounder, like a pound and a half. All right, have fun, plenty.
If we were smart, man, we'd go fish where you couldn't fish yesterday.
Do what now?
If we were smart, we'd go fish where you couldn't fish yesterday.
I couldn't fish this yesterday, there's boats on it.
Oh, I know, I started here.
Oh, you started here?
I caught 3 of my keepers here.
Did you?
Because here at this tournament was basically the same thing. They were flipping a craw and, pretty much the same weight. It looked like 1/2 ounce weight. Just flipping bushes, same thing down at Sabine. Not a lot of change from that, which kind of surprised me a little bit because the bite wasn't real good. But, in the Classic, you're going for the big bite. So I think that's what it was here, that was their best chance to get the big bite. Clint was running a Phoenix boat. Again, great ride, love the Phoenixes. All Lowrance, Ghost trolling motor, all Lowrance sonar. Didn't ever use the forward-facing sonar at all. Clint started out throwing a swim jig with a white, kind of an inverted craw trailer. And he threw that quite a bit, and I don't believe we ever got bit on that. And then he went to flipping that, 1/2 ounce Texas rig craw like everybody else, and we did end up getting the 3 fish. Late in the day, we come across some lily pads, and we only had about 30 minutes left. And I just mentioned to him again, he was talkative, he let me talk, and he talked back. He's not quite like Brandon, but we had some good conversation. I said, that's something I want to do. We don't have any lily pads, and I haven't learned to throw a frog yet. And he opens up the hatch, he digs out a frog rod, and he just started, and I'm like, oh, you don't have to show. He said, no, he said, here, and he throws it out there. And oddly enough, we got a couple of swirls. I really wished he'd hooked one, then I'd have felt really good about that. But we ended up, we couldn't get anything towards the end of the day, weighed in 3 fish. The water was nice and calm on day 2, so the lake was open, it fished big again. And, we ran across a few boats, but not near as many as we did on day 1. One thing he did do that was impressive, the university he went to, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name of the university, but he actually started the bass team back in the day, and now that's a pretty predominant bass team, and they're even giving out scholarships for kids. So, kudos to you, Clint. So the weigh-ins at the end of each day were spectacular. Dave Mercer, and I asked every angler, I said, is Dave Mercer as goofy as he acts up on stage? All 3 of them said, yep, he sure is. But anyway, he does a great job as an MC. Again, we had Tripp as the weighmaster, and it was a great event. And here's some clips of it. Just had a good time there, and it was packed. It was packed. Big crowds, big noise. It was a lot of fun. So if you get a chance to go, you need to go. All right, so now for the expo. So by the time we would get back, we wouldn't see the full weigh-in, and the expo would already be closed. So the only day I got to go to the expo was on Sunday. And I'll tell you what, that was one of my favorite parts of this, believe it or not. I mean, I got to BS with Jason Christie, with Stetson Blaylock, with Mark Menendez. I mean, there were tons of pros there, and they're there to answer your questions. I was talking to Jason Christie about the new padding that they put on the express boats. It's not a carpet, it's pad, and the advantages of that. Stetson Blaylock, he's telling me how he sets up his flipping rig. He uses braid and then he uses a small piece of fluorocarbon, and he talked about all the advantages and disadvantages, what type of braid, you know, I mean, and Mark Menendez, he's just a great guy. He just really is. But where I did have a lot of fun, I went over to the Bass Tank booth, and I was hoping I would run into Mr. Mark Jeffries and Matt Painrack from the BTL crew. I was going to go ahead and get a hat anyway, a BTL hat. If you guys didn't know, they got merchandise now. And I got the juice on Mark Jeffries, a little bit. But Mark and I stood there and talked for probably 30 minutes or so. He is just what he is. If you listen to that podcast or listen to him on YouTube, Bass Talk Live, that is Mark Jeffries, 100%. Super nice guy. Matt Painrack, great guy. Also ran into Bradley Hallman, who's on BTL from time to time over at the AFCO booth. And we were sitting there watching the TV of the live coverage and talking to him, and, you know, just general conversation, just a real nice guy. But you walk into the expo and they had 5-gallon Berkeley buckets. You know, one side said Berkeley, the other side Bassmaster Classic. And I'm going, well, what's this for? I didn't grab one like a dummy. Man, they give away all kinds of free stuff. Like I say, gators galore. And you go by these booths and you'll have vendors who just want to get their name out there. And I picked up, you know, a few baits for like $3 for these really nice jerk baits. They look nice anyway. We'll see how they fish later. I did end up buying some power poles for my GoPros on my boat so I can get you guys a little better footage. And, you know, the expo was great. The only knock was I talked to one guy. He'd been there doing Bassmaster Expos for 28 years. And he said, this is the first one I ever been to where it really wasn't air conditioned. I mean, they tried to pump some air in, but it was still pretty warm in there. And the flies were pretty bad. So, you know, they had them in like the cattle barns there. Dickey's Arena is a rodeo. You know, they hold a lot of rodeos. So there were quite a few flies, but it didn't bother me any, you know, because I was talking to professional fishermen. But a lot to see there, a lot of boats. One conversation I had in particular that was a pretty neat conversation was over at the Phoenix Boats. I ran into, I'm not sure, he acted like he was maybe an engineer or something, but he saw my Marshal shirt and he was really into, you know, how many times I'd marshaled, the different boats I had ridden in, because he said, we don't get a lot of feedback how we compare to other boats. So we sat there and talked for 20, 30 minutes, you know, just about, I was telling him, you know, I was impressed with the Falcon, you know, and we talked about some of the advantages, disadvantages to the Rangers. I told him about how important for me as a marshal it was that we had good handholds, you know, because you're doing 70, especially on day one when it was real windy. Luckily, that Falcon had really good handholds. I had no problem staying in the boat, felt real comfortable and secure in there. And, you know, the Phoenix isn't quite as good, and some of the pros and cons of that, like a Triton. Triton is hard. All you can do is hold under the seat, and you get bruised up in here because of that. But anyway, some neat conversations at the expo. Right from the expo, I headed home, listened to the weigh-ins, and overall, guys, I had a great week. If you get a chance to do this, if you're interested, do it. It's definitely worth the $500. I wouldn't, you know, that's not chump change by any means, but for what you get at the Classic compared to a regular Elite Series, it's worth the extra $400. Don't forget, sign up, be a Bass member, because you get to register to be a Marshal one day earlier. And that's very important. I was number 19 on the wait list and just about didn't get to go. And, you know, I only waited about 6-8 hours after registration opened. Well, it was longer than that. It was probably more like 12 hours after registration opened, I entered mine, and I didn't think I was going to get in. So be a Bass member, day early, and enjoy it, because it is a lot of fun. We'll see you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe. Let's get out on the water and have a great day.